This will be the video tutorial for section 2 of the Emma Triple Pouch Bag. This section will cover the making and attaching of your piping pieces, which I have right here. Now, before we go ahead and I show you how to actually assemble the piping, I just want to cover a little bit of information for you on piping itself. So if you're using a fabric or a vinyl for your piping, it needs to be cut on the 45-degree angle. So I've got this piece of vinyl right here. So if I were to place that on the 45-degree angle, just like that, this section right here is my piping. The reason it's cut on the bias is it has that stretch, that really good stretch, so that when you place the piping on a corner, especially like right around here, it'll be nice and smooth and you won't get any bends. If you are using piping on the straight only, then it's not necessary to actually cut it on the bias. But when you are using piping on a curve, you do need it cut on the bias. So you will need 3 strips of piping for this bag, 22 inches long. So basically, what I want to suggest to you is that in the instructions, the cutting instructions, it tells you to cut your pieces at 1 1/8 of an inch wide. Now, I love to use a lamb skin. It's beautiful, it's soft, it's flexible, and it's actually a perfect thickness. This is lamb right here. You can use it on your domestic machine as well. It is leather, but it's so light that it sews beautifully and it gives you a nice finish. This is lambskin from Buckskin Leather out west in Canada. And I am looking at selling some of the strips in kit form for the website. So keep an eye posted for that. And I'll also be selling the cording that I use in this bag. So basically, if you are using a thicker vinyl, like this one is fairly thick. Now, if I were to take a caliper, which is for leather, and measure the thickness of the piping that I have right here, which is approximately 1.5 ounces or millimeters thick. And if I were to actually take this vinyl, it actually comes out to almost 3 ounces in comparison to leather. So that is really, really thick for your piping. So you may want to consider what you're going to be using for your piping and try to find something a little thinner. I'm not saying it won't work, but I'm just saying it can be a little thicker. So if you are using a thicker vinyl like this, then I would suggest taking a little piece. This is a big piece, obviously, but you want to take a little piece. And before you cut your strips of piping, you want to make sure that 1 1/8 of an inch is going to be adequate for your piping. You need 3/8 of an inch for a seam allowance, plus your cording in the side, plus your fold over, and another 3/8 of an inch. What I generally will do is I'll take that piece of piping and I will lay that down just easily on that side, and then I will fold this over. I'll take a ruler and I will find my 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'll press the edge of this ruler against the cording that's inside here, and I'll find, if I have to move this over a bit, I find my 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then what I would do is I would take and put a mark, and I would measure the width. So that is actually 1 1/4 inches is what I would need. So that gives me a strip of 1 1/4, and that will include my cording and my fold over and my 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. You want to keep everything at 3/8 of an inch, because if not, everything is going to kind of distort away. So that's just a suggestion on how to do piping if you are using fabric or vinyl, and you do definitely need this stretch going to go around your corner. So I'll set that aside. Now I've got my 3 strips of piping right here and the cording all ready to go. What I've done is I have marked center, and I'll bring this up close to the camera, center on my piping and center on my piping strip and center on my cording. So you can see those two, so that when I lay this piece down on top of here and I glue it, it's easy for me to get it even with the center markings already done. I have also on this piece, so that you can, and this you can do if you want. I don't always do this, but I thought it would be nice for you to see what I'm doing. You want to place glue down that center. So I've actually drawn a line down the center of this piece of piping strip so that I can put glue there and keep it all nicely centered. Now before I do glue this, I want to show you what I actually use for my glue. This is Rowley fringe adhesive. As you can see, I buy it by the gallon. I go through it quite a bit, and I've used this for well over 20 years. I absolutely love it. It's the best fabric glue on the market as far as I'm concerned. It's easy to work with both leather and fabric, and it's just a really great glue. Every pattern I write, every video I do, I use that glue generally, unless I tell you otherwise. I keep a small amount in a little container so it's easier to maneuver when I need it. But basically, if you are also using, if your glue won't take, if you're using a vinyl, and when you go to fold this over and that glue won't hold, you can use double-sided tape. Now this is 1/8 of an inch, and I would suggest just placing it up along that edge so that when you fold that piping over, it holds everything in place. So it depends on what you are using for your piping. I absolutely love the lambskin though, so if you wanted to try something a little different, I will be selling it in black. At this point, no other colors, but strictly black, because that tends to be the color of the piping that I'm using in most of my bags. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to start by placing a bead of glue down, right down that center line, all the way down to the end. Put a little bit more right there. I'm going to take my cording, which I've already marked my center, as you can see right there, and I'm going to place that along the center mark of the piping and just run that cording down to the end. You should have approximately 1 inch, because this piping piece is 22 inches long and your cording is 20. You should have approximately 1 inch on either side, either end. You want to get that nicely smoothed in there. And then what I do is I add more glue along this edge, because I'm going to be folding it in half to create my piping. You don't need a lot. You can smooth that out if you wish a little bit, and keep a damp cloth by your side. So what you want to do is I start at the center generally, and I then fold this piece right in half, and see how easily that glue holds. It's perfect. Go all the way down to the end, and I push as well onto the cording to push it right down into that folded area. I know it's hard to see with the black in the video, because I'll get it down as far as I can get down, and then I can all the way down right to the edge. Now there's no piping in this last 1 inch, remember? And then I'm going to fold this one. You want to keep a damp cloth by your side as well when you're working with glue. That way you don't get it all over your piping. So what I've done is I've encased the cording into that lambskin. Now I'm going to take my poly roller, and I'm just going to kind of go over that edge right at the end, and then I'm going to kind of dig this side right here of the poly roller into that edge of that cording to kind of define it. You could also use a bone folder as well if you wish, but I like to use this because then it connects the two pieces together as well. There we go. So this is what I've done. I'm approximately 1 inch short down here, and you can see my piping or my cording is encased inside that strip that I have just cut. So this is 1 1/8 inch wide. Now what I want to do is I want to mark center here on this piece, and I like to fold this in half because then I get a true center, so all the way down to this end. And you want to just place a mark on the lip of the piping, so right here. So there's my center mark. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do these other two pieces, and then I'll come back and I'll show you how we attach this to your two exterior A's and your C. Okay, I've got all of my pipings made and ready to go. The center mark's already on them, so I'm just going to set them up here aside. You're going to need to retrieve pattern pieces A, your exteriors, two at both of them, the both sides of A, and one C. And we're going to be adding piping to the outside edge of these pieces. Now, before I continue, I just wanted to just remind you that I use glue in here. This is leather, so it actually bonds really, really well for the piping, and it doesn't twist and turn. If you're using vinyl or fabric and you want to do your piping the traditional way, then by all means you can go right ahead. This is how it's traditionally done. You just fold it over, no glue, sorry, it's just stitched in place. I would just recommend that you do not get too close to this edge, because when you go to put your pieces together, if you don't clear that stitch line, it'll show on the outside, and then you have to do another pass. But by all means, you can certainly go ahead and do the piping in this manner if you choose to do so. Okay, so we're going to start with one piece at a time. So I'm going to just place the two A pieces up to the top, and I'm going to work with pattern piece C. Now remember, you have got your markings, which is your lower piping placement mark and your upper piping placement mark, and your center is as well at the bottom. So what we're going to do is what's called a dry fit. Now I'm going to get my clips here so we can clip this all in place. A dry fit, now I'm going to turn this the other way, so because that's easier for me to work with. So what you want to do is you want to take the marking on the piping and you want to place it to the center marking on this pattern, which is C. You want to clip that in place, and you want to then clip probably about 3 inches down on that flat side. So what we need to do is we need to bring this piping up and around like this, but you can see it's not cooperating here on this corner. So what we need to do is we need to snip. Now this is a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, so you want to snip approximately 1/4 of an inch. Now if you want, you can actually take a ruler. I know that there are some people who have worried about snipping too far in, but if you take your ruler and you mark 1/4 inch along that piping edge, just like that, then it gives you an idea of not to go past that drawn line. So I just want to move this down a little bit here, and I want to clip from about here to here. So I'm going to take a really sharp pair of scissors, and I'm just going to clip, and I want to make the snips, I should say, at least maybe 1/4 of an inch in space. You could go 1/8 of an inch if you wish. That would give you a nice curve. Kind of hard to do this when I'm holding it upright. Normally I put it on the table. I want to make sure I've got, so I need to go a little bit more. And that should be enough to go around. There we go. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that that's going to nicely smooth around this corner, and that I've covered all of the corner and up to the top. I'm going to do the same over here. I'm actually just going to mark so I know from here and come around to about here. And I'm going to snip approximately 1/4 of an inch snips along that area that I've marked. Now you don't want to go too far for sure, because you will end up snipping too far in, and then you cannot cover that piping, and then you would have to start all over again with your piping. So if it does help you to draw that 1/4 inch line, then by all means go right ahead and do that. So I've gone ahead, and I know that this is going to fold beautifully around there. So that's what I class as a dry fit. I've just made sure that the areas that I'm clipping are clipped and ready to go, because I want to be adding some glue to the right side of this piece so that I can glue the piping in place. Just set this up here. So again, I'm using my Rowley fringe adhesive, and I am actually just going to start on 1/2 in the pattern. I suggest going all the way around, but I'll just work with 1/2 at this point so I can show you what to do. You want to go up to that lower line. Remember, you have 2 lines. You just want to go to that lower line, not the upper placement line. You want to then place your piping with the lip side to the edge, and you want to clip that in place. You want to go along, and this is where a lot of times you don't have to clip as you go until the very end, because the glue holds everything in place. Make sure you make a nice round corner all the way up to the top. So I'll bring this close so you can see. There's my corner. You see how nicely that molded around that corner? And the snipping along the piping is really what helps. So I'm going to add a few clips along here so that it doesn't move on me, because the glue is still wet. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add glue to the other side. Now I'm just adding a little bit along this edge. If you don't want to use glue, you actually can use double-sided tape. So if you use 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape along this edge and then peel the paper off, it will hold as well. You will not be sewing through the tape, so it won't gum up your needle, and you will be removing it after the fact. So I'll go along here, make my curve, and up to the top. And make sure everything is nice and in place. And then I'm going to add some clips. So that's what you should look like to this point with your piping. Now we're going to deal with up here at the top. Now there's 2 piping marks. There's the first one. I'll just move that glue out of the way. There's your first one. Let's see if I can get that a little bit stronger so you can see it. There's your lower piping mark, and there's your upper piping mark. There's only a 1/2 inch between these 2. What you want to do is you want to get your piping right to that first line. So that's where your glue is going to be, right to this first line. You're going to take some scissors and you're going to snip from that line on your piping only, not through your piece, just your piping. You just want to get a snip in about a 1/4 of an inch, just like this. So what I've done is I've just snipped along the piping. Then I'm going to cut out a pie-shaped piece, so like a triangle on that piping only. Let's see if I can get this up here. There we go. And it's about a 45-degree angle. So you just want to get rid of that. So what I've done is I have snipped out that little piece. Before I fold this over, I'm going to add a little bit of glue right up to that last piping placement mark at the very top. And I'm going to bring this folded edge right here of the piping. This is a fold. Now remember, there's no piping in here at all. And I'm going to align it at that mark. Get rid of a little bit. There we go. And fold that up so that it looks like this. just like that. You want that that folded part to align with that upper line of the piping. Then you can actually snip off. You can flip it to the wrong side and you can snip off. It should, there we go. Make sure I've got that right. I think I'll put a clip there so it's not going to slide on me. And fold it over. There we go. This way. That was sliding, and then I'm just going to get rid of the excess. And I'm going to clip that back in place. Just like that. I'm going to do the same thing over here to this side. I'm going to snip at the line of the piping only. And then I'm going to take out a triangle piece at about a 45-degree angle. Going to add some glue up at the top between that 1/2 inch mark between those two markings, and I'm going to fold this over so that that folded edge aligns with that mark. I'm going to clip off that extra, actually hold it up, snip off the extra. There we go. And that's what it should look like. You should have those two edges up at the top. Now don't be worried if your piping does not go up to that line. Basically it's inside, encased in that piping area, so it doesn't matter if it's short or not, so don't be too concerned about that. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set this piece aside, and I'm going to do the other two pieces, and I'll come back and show you actually what we do from that point on. So now I'm back. I have actually done all the pieces. I have gone to the machine as well, and I have stitched them in place. So you can see, I'll bring you close up. The snip at this corner reduces the bulk when you fold this piece over, and these lines that are the placement marks, they make sure that everything is nicely aligned in place so that when you look at the exterior of your bag, everything is even, so you don't get a little piece of piping up higher or lower. That's what those marks are there for. Now I've gone ahead, I've gone around, you can see I've used a pink thread just to show you where I have stitched all the way around and back up to the other side. This is not super close to that cording. It's a little bit away from it. This stitch line is just to secure that in place. And basically if you missed with the glue or something and you put two pieces together and went to stitch, it could still move. So it's just a secure stitching. So these are both the pattern piece A's, and this is the pattern piece C, which has the marking to the back. Now I just wanted to tell you why I glue this piping on. In all of my time as a drapery designer, anytime I place piping on a pillow or a duvet cover or in a drapery valance or anything, I always glued my piping in place, because then when you sew it on, everything is flat. There are many times when people try to skip a step and will apply the piping to that main frame just in separate pieces. What can happen is you can pull a little bit more on the piping and you can end up with a little bit of a pucker here in the corner. This way it's glued in place, you've stitched, you'll have no problems, and everything will lay flat and clean for when you're ready to stitch it together. So that concludes section 2, which is your piping and your addition of your piping to your pieces. The next video will be the tutorial on the assembly of these exterior pieces together.